My fiancée mocked my dead father's gift ring during engagement photos, so I walked away, mid-shoot, and let her explain the empty frame to everyone. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I thought I'd finally found my forever person. Vanessa was stunning, charming in that effortless way that made everyone smile around her, and for the first time in years, I felt like someone truly understood me. I'd been through a lot lately. Losing my dad had left a hole in my chest I wasn't sure would ever heal. But Vanessa had this way of making me feel alive again, like I could laugh without guilt, like the past didn't have to weigh me down forever. My dad's passing had been rough, but amidst all the grief, he'd left me something incredibly meaningful. A ring he had worn for decades, one he had meant to pass down as a family heirloom. It wasn't flashy, just a simple band, engraved with our family crest. But to me, it was a symbol of everything I loved about him: integrity, warmth, the quiet strength that had guided our family. I had carried it with me everywhere, knowing one day it would be part of the next big chapter of my life. When I proposed to Vanessa, I wanted the moment to honor that memory. I'd spent weeks planning the engagement photo shoot, picking locations that meant something to me, carefully coordinating with the photographer to capture every tiny detail. The golden sunlight hitting the ring just right, the subtle focus on our hands, the way Vanessa's smile mirrored the joy I'd felt the day I first held the ring. I even asked the photographer to capture some shots with the ring front and center, a nod to my dad's memory, something I hoped Vanessa would treasure as much as I did. As we pulled up to the studio, my heart raced with anticipation. The photographer waved us in, the soft hum of studio lights creating a cozy glow, and I felt that familiar mix of excitement and nerves. Vanessa reached for my hand, her touch warm, and whispered, "This is going to be perfect." I squeezed her hand back, smiling, believing her, trusting her. I had no idea how quickly that illusion was about to shatter. From the moment we stepped inside the studio, something felt off. Not with Vanessa herself. She was still smiling, still charming. But there were tiny things I couldn't ignore. Little smirks when the photographer mentioned the ring, the way she adjusted her hair with one hand while letting her eyes flick toward the band with a barely there roll. At first, I brushed it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. I'd lost my dad. Maybe I was just overly sensitive. Vanessa was flawless in her poses, moving effortlessly, laughing at every joke the photographer threw out. Yet there was a subtle undercurrent in her tone, a quiet tease that made my stomach knot, in a way I hadn't felt before. "Do you really think anyone notices old rings like that?" she murmured under her breath when she thought I wasn't looking. I forced a laugh, saying, "It's important to me, Vanessa. It's sentimental." She just nodded and smiled, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a shadow of amusement I didn't like. My mom and sister were there too, buzzing with excitement. Mom's been grieving Dad, yes, but she had tried to be upbeat today, insisting this was a happy moment. I caught her glance toward Vanessa. There was a softness in her eyes, a tentative approval. My sister, ever the observer, whispered, "She seems nice." And I nodded, though unease was creeping in. I tried to refocus, telling myself this was a beautiful day, that the photos would capture love, not tension. I positioned the ring, adjusted my cuff, took a deep breath. The photographer started snapping shots, and Vanessa slipped her hand into mine. I felt the warmth, the intimacy, and allowed myself a small smile. Maybe I was imagining things, and yet, a small, cold seed of doubt had been planted. Vanessa's casual remark about the ring lingered in my mind, a whisper that something wasn't quite right. I shook my head, trying to push it away. But deep down, I knew that first day of excitement might be the calm before a storm I hadn't even seen coming. The first real crack came when the photographer asked us to do some close-up shots of our hands. I held out my left hand, the ring catching the soft studio light, just like I'd planned. And for a split second, I felt a swell of pride. This was my dad. This was family. This was tradition. But then Vanessa tilted her hand, smirked, and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Wow, that thing is, really something." My chest tightened. I blinked at her, unsure if I'd heard right. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Oh, nothing," she said quickly, brushing it off like a joke. But her eyes sparkled with this mischievous glint, like she thought it was funny that I'd taken something so meaningful seriously. I felt a strange mix of disbelief and anger. This was my dad's ring, my connection to him, and here she was, laughing quietly at it. My hand twitched slightly, gripping the ring tighter. I could feel the heat rising in my face, and for the first time, I realized that this might not just be a little harmless teasing. Mom noticed my discomfort immediately. She leaned closer, whispering, "Is everything okay?" I nodded, muttering, "It's fine," though the tightness in my chest betrayed me. The photographer, oblivious to the tension, continued snapping photos, asking us to smile, hold hands, kiss, act natural. I forced a smile, but Vanessa kept glancing at the ring, that same smirk curling on her lips. I tried to drown it out, to focus on the memory of my dad, imagining his warm smile and the pride he'd felt seeing me happy, seeing me step into this next chapter. But Vanessa's little jabs, her quiet amusement, gnawed at me. Each laugh, each whispered comment, chipped away at the excitement I'd carried into the studio. By the time we moved on to the next set of poses, I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. This wasn't just teasing. There was a lack of respect here, a disregard for something I held sacred. And I knew, with a sinking feeling, that this day, the day I had imagined perfect photos and perfect memories, was about to take a turn I couldn't yet prepare for. By the time we moved outside for the next set of shots, the tension between us had grown like a storm just on the horizon. The sunlight was soft, golden, perfect for the photos, but every time I glanced at Vanessa, I felt a jolt of unease. She was laughing and chatting with the photographer, striking poses that looked effortless. Yet, every now and then, she'd glance at my hand and let out a little giggle, shaking her head as if my cherished ring were some ridiculous relic. My chest tightened each time, a mix of anger and disbelief. I tried to focus on the warmth of her hand in mine, the way her fingers intertwined with mine, trying to remind myself of all the reasons I'd loved her, of the life we were planning. "It's really beautiful," I said softly, hoping she would mirror my sentiment. She looked at me with a tilt of her head and a playful smirk, whispering, "Beautiful, if you're into that old-fashioned, boring style." My stomach lurched. I froze for a moment, gripping the ring tighter, trying to steady my voice. "It's not boring," I muttered, my jaw tight. "It's important." The photographer, sensing the awkwardness, jumped in. "Let's get a few shots of you laughing naturally. Just enjoy the moment," he said. Vanessa laughed again, this time louder, almost exaggeratedly, turning her head slightly as if she were performing for someone else. Every chuckle felt like a tiny sting, each one a reminder that she didn't see this the way I did. My dad's memory, the family legacy attached to this ring, was being mocked right in front of me. My mom noticed too. Her smile faltered slightly, eyes flicking between Vanessa and me, her expression caught between concern and disbelief. I wanted to say something, anything, to defend the ring, to honor Dad, but the words caught in my throat. I forced myself to smile for the photographer, to follow his directions, but inside, a storm was brewing. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just a minor slip. Vanessa's attitude toward my father's gift wasn't going away. It was clear, intentional even, and with every laugh, every smirk, I felt my trust in her start to unravel. I had no idea just how far this betrayal would go, but deep down, I knew things were about to get a lot worse. By the time we returned to the indoor set for the final poses, the atmosphere had shifted. It was subtle at first, Vanessa's laughter a little sharper, her glances at the ring a little longer, but soon it became impossible to ignore. She leaned toward the photographer, pointing at my hand, with a grin. "Honestly, who even wears rings like that anymore?" she said, loud enough for me and my mom to hear. My stomach dropped. The words felt like a punch, sharp and unrelenting. I froze, the heat rising to my face. "Vanessa," I said, my voice low, trying to keep it calm. "This isn't funny. This ring, it belonged to my dad." My words hung in the air, heavy, and for a moment, I thought she might soften. But instead, she tilted her head and let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Oh, come on. It's just a ring," she said, brushing it off like it was meaningless. I could feel my chest tighten, my hands trembling ever so slightly around the band. My mom's expression changed immediately. She looked between us, confusion and concern etched across her face. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, but the truth was, I wasn't okay at all. The photographer, sensing the tension, tried to keep things moving, but Vanessa's smirk lingered in my peripheral vision, like a knife twisting. I felt cornered, trapped in a moment that should have been joyful and celebratory. I thought about my dad, about how proud he had been, how he'd wanted this moment to be about love and family, not ridicule. My heart ached at the thought that someone I trusted so deeply could be so callous in front of everyone. I felt a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief all at once. As the photographer instructed us to pose for a series of romantic shots, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't going to be a simple day of photos. Vanessa had crossed a line, mocking something sacred to me in front of family and strangers alike, and there was no turning back. The tension in my chest grew heavier with every flash of the camera, and I knew, in that instant, that I couldn't let this continue much longer without confronting it. I'd been holding it in as best I could, trying to smile, trying to keep the shoot on track, but the moment finally came when I couldn't anymore. Vanessa leaned in close, pretending to adjust my collar, and whispered with that same sharp smirk, "Seriously, do you really expect anyone to think that ring is classy?" The words hit me like a slap. My chest tightened, my hands felt clammy, and for the first time that day, I felt pure, unfiltered anger. Without thinking, I took a step back. The photographer froze, mid-click, and Vanessa's eyes widened in surprise. I said nothing at first. I didn't need to. The silence spoke volumes. The family around us noticed too, the air thick with confusion and tension. My mom opened her mouth, probably to say something, but I shook my head. I couldn't let her explain this away anymore. Not here, not like this. Then, almost in slow motion, I turned and walked away from the set. I left my hand bare, the ring still in my pocket, invisible to everyone but me. Vanessa's voice rose, a mixture of panic and indignation. "Wait, what are you doing?" she exclaimed, gesturing wildly toward the empty frame where my hand had been. The photographer looked helpless. The assistant froze, and my mom's hand flew to her mouth in shock. The twist hit like lightning. Vanessa tried to cover it up, explaining to everyone that the ring was just a prop, that I hadn't wanted photographed. Her excuses sounded flimsy, even to her voice faltering as she gestured toward the empty space on the set. I stayed silent, watching, feeling a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. For once, I wasn't the one trying to keep the peace. I was letting her unravel in front of everyone. As she stumbled through her explanation, my anger cooled slightly, replaced by a sense of clarity. I finally saw Vanessa for who she truly was. Charming, yes, but incapable of respecting something sacred to me, something that connected me to my dad. And in that moment, I realized the day I thought would be perfect had already changed forever. The question now wasn't about photos or props. It was about whether I could ever trust her again. The room felt impossibly still after I walked away, like the air itself had thickened around us. Vanessa's face was pale, her smile gone, replaced by panic and frustration. She waved her hands desperately toward the photographer and the family, trying to spin a story. "He didn't want the ring photographed today. It's personal," she stammered, her voice rising with every word. But no one seemed convinced. The empty frame where my hand had been spoke louder than any excuse she could offer. My mom's eyes were wide with disbelief. "Personal? Vanessa, it's a symbol of his father. Do you even understand what that means?" she asked softly, though there was a sharp edge underneath her calm tone. My sister whispered something supportive, like a lifeline in the chaos. "He's right, you know. That's really important to him," she said, glancing at Vanessa with a mix of anger and disappointment. For the first time that day, I realized the family had begun to see Vanessa as she truly was, not the charming, perfect fiancée I had believed in. Vanessa's attempts to rationalize crumbled under their quiet scrutiny. Her voice faltered, her gestures became frantic, as if she could physically hold the truth back from showing. I didn't mean it like that. He's overreacting," she yelled, but the words sounded hollow. I could feel a strange sense of power watching her unravel, not in a cruel way, but in the way someone finally sees a pattern laid bare, undeniable. Inside, I felt a mix of relief and lingering anger. Relief that the facade was cracking, that my family was witnessing her true colors. Anger at myself for ever giving her that level of trust, at the way she had mocked something so sacred. My hand still ached with the need to defend the ring, but my mind was calmer than it had been all day. The photographer, unsure how to proceed, paused, giving space for the tension to settle. And in that silence, I realized just how much control I had regained, not through yelling or confrontation, but by simply walking away and letting the truth speak for itself. Yet even as a small sense of justice settled in, I knew this wasn't over. Vanessa's reaction had revealed more than I wanted to see, and I could feel the storm of what was coming, just beyond the edge of that studio light. Vanessa wasn't done yet. As we tried to continue with the shoot, she began whispering under her breath, loud enough for me to hear, little jabs meant to undermine me. "You're so sensitive," she said, tilting her head with a false sweetness that made my skin crawl. Can't take a joke, can you? Each word felt deliberate, like she was testing how far she could push me, seeing if I would snap or cave. I could feel my jaw tighten, my hands clenching at my sides, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. The photographer tried to keep the session moving, suggesting poses, complimenting us on our smiles, but Vanessa continued her subtle digs. She'd tilt her head to glance at my hand, smirk, and murmur something about the old-fashioned style of the ring, as if she were the one in control, orchestrating this little game. I could feel the heat in my face rise with every passing moment, my chest tight, a mixture of frustration and disbelief washing over me. How could someone I loved, someone I trusted so completely, treat something so sacred to me with such blatant disregard? I started replaying every small moment from our relationship in my mind, the subtle signs I'd ignored, the faint smirks, the little comments about my family, the way she seemed amused by the things I held dear. Everything suddenly made sense in a painful, infuriating way. She wasn't just insensitive. She was incapable of empathy, incapable of respect. And for the first time, I realized that her charm had been a mask, hiding the truth I hadn't wanted to see. My mom shot me a look, a mixture of concern and warning, and I felt a surge of clarity. I wasn't imagining it. Vanessa's behavior wasn't a fluke, it was deliberate. And as the photographer adjusted the lights, asking us to smile for another set of shots, I knew that what was coming next would either break me or finally make me take control. Deep down, I felt that creeping, heavy realization. This engagement, this relationship, was on the edge of collapse, and the next move was mine to make. By the time we wrapped up the shoot, I felt completely drained, physically, emotionally, mentally. I sat on a small bench near the back of the studio, my hands buried in my pockets, the ring still tucked away, warm against my palm. My chest ached, a constant dull throb, and my mind raced with every insult, every smirk, every moment Vanessa had mocked my dad's gift. I'd never felt so alone in a crowd before, everyone around us laughing and snapping photos, but I was drowning in a mix of grief, betrayal, and disbelief. I thought about my dad, about how proud he'd been, about how he had passed down that ring with love and faith in me. And here I was, someone I thought I could trust more than anyone, turning that symbol into a joke in front of family, in front of strangers. My vision blurred slightly as the weight of it all pressed down on me. I could feel my stomach twist, a tight knot of anger and sorrow. For the first time, I questioned myself. Had I really known Vanessa at all? Had I misread everything? Vanessa approached, her face painted with a combination of fake concern and irritation. "Are you seriously still sulking over a ring?" she said, her voice light but cutting. "It's not that important." I wanted to shout, to hurl back years of pent-up frustration, to scream that this wasn't just a ring. It was a memory, a legacy, a part of my father. But instead, I stayed silent, the words choking in my throat, letting the hurt sit heavy in my chest. I glanced around, noticing the subtle looks from my mom and sister, concern, disappointment, maybe even fear. Even the photographer avoided eye contact, unsure how to navigate the tension. In that moment, I hit rock bottom. I felt exposed, powerless, humiliated, like someone had peeled away the last layer of my trust and left me raw. And yet, amid that despair, a small spark of clarity flickered. I realized I didn't have to let this go on. I didn't have to beg for respect or validation. But taking the next step meant confronting everything, and I had no idea if I was ready for the fallout that would follow. I stayed silent for a moment longer, letting the tension in the studio settle like a thick fog. Vanessa fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable with my lack of response, and the photographer gave a quiet, awkward cough, unsure how to proceed. Then, without thinking twice, I made my decision. I would let her explain herself, let her stumble, let her defend what she'd mocked in front of everyone, and I would stay calm. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to beg for understanding. I just needed her to face the truth she'd been trying to hide. As the photographer adjusted the camera for another shot, I stepped aside, keeping my hand tucked in my pocket where the ring rested. Vanessa hesitated, looking at me with confusion and rising panic. "Wait, what are you—" she started, but I cut her off with a simple shake of my head. I didn't say a word. Instead, I let her take center stage, gesturing toward the empty frame where my hand should have been. Her voice wavered as she tried to explain. "Oh, he didn't want the ring photographed today," she stammered, flailing slightly as she pointed to the empty hand that had once held it. It's personal." The words sounded hollow even to me, and I could see the disbelief spreading through the faces around us. My mom, my sister, even the photographer, all silently processing the absurdity of her claim. Watching her fumble, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and clarity. For the first time, the control was mine. She had mocked something sacred to me, tried to belittle it, and now she was forced to defend herself publicly, unable to escape the weight of her own words. Every flustered gesture, every shaky sentence, was validation that I had been right to walk away earlier. And yet, even as I stood there, silent and steady, I knew this wasn't over. Vanessa's pride wouldn't allow her to simply let it go, and I could feel the tension in the room tightening like a coiled spring. Whatever happened next, I was ready to see her true colors fully revealed, and I wasn't afraid of the fallout. Vanessa's attempts to recover quickly crumbled under the quiet scrutiny of everyone around her. She waved her hands frantically, her voice rising in desperation. I didn't mean to offend anyone. He's overreacting, she shouted, but the words came out hollow, lacking conviction. My mom's eyes narrowed, my sister's jaw tightened, and even the photographer paused mid-click, capturing her panic as much as our intended engagement shots. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for someone to speak, and for the first time that day, it wasn't me who was under fire. It was her. I stood silently, watching, feeling a sense of calm wash over me amidst the chaos. Watching Vanessa try to spin her way out of a situation she had caused, knowing that her excuses were unraveling in real time, was strangely empowering. Every flustered word she spoke, every gesture that contradicted her story, only confirmed what I'd begun to suspect weeks ago. Her charm had been a mask, her affection conditional, her respect for me and my family superficial at best. My mom finally broke the silence, her voice calm but firm. Vanessa, you've disrespected something that matters deeply to him. That's not just a personal preference. That's his father's memory. There was no softness in her tone, no room for argument. My sister added quietly but pointedly, You can't just mock something sacred and then try to explain it away. That's not okay. Even the photographer's sympathetic glance told the story. Vanessa had no credibility left. Inside, I felt a mix of relief, vindication, and lingering hurt. Relief that the family was witnessing the truth. Vindication that I hadn't been imagining her mockery, and hurt that someone I loved so deeply had shown her true colors so publicly. Vanessa looked around, realizing she had no allies left in the room, her usual confidence evaporating. As she stumbled backward, trying to collect herself, I felt a quiet sense of power settle within me. I had let the truth speak without raising my voice, without losing my composure. And though there was still a storm of emotions to navigate, I knew one thing for certain. The mask was gone, and I could finally see her for who she really was. The studio was silent, except for Vanessa's shallow breaths and the soft click of the camera as the photographer packed up. I finally stepped forward, my hand still tucked in my pocket around the ring, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. Watching her unravel had been vindicating, but now it was time to reclaim what mattered most: my dignity, my father's memory, and my own sense of self-respect. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to beg for apologies. The silence itself was my statement. Vanessa avoided my gaze, her usual confidence gone, replaced by guilt, frustration, and disbelief. She opened her mouth, probably to explain, to plead, but I shook my head gently. No, I said softly, letting the single word carry the weight of everything I'd felt all day. My mom nodded at me approvingly. My sister's hand found mine briefly, a silent show of solidarity. Even the photographer, sensing the end of a tense ordeal, gave me a small, understanding smile. As we left the studio, I felt the sun warm against my face. The light no longer filtered through tension, but through clarity. I thought about my dad, about how proud he would have been, and for the first time since his passing, I felt a deep sense of peace. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't made a scene, but I had stood my ground. I had shown that respect and love for family weren't things to be mocked or diminished. Vanessa's car pulled up beside mine, and she tried one last time to speak, but I shook my head again and walked toward my own vehicle. This wasn't just about a ring anymore. It was about boundaries, values, and seeing people for who they truly were. As I drove away, the city humming softly around me, I felt a weight lift. The engagement, the photos, Vanessa's mockery. It all became a moment of revelation, a turning point. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I would never let someone disrespect my family, my values, or myself again. And for the first time in a long while, I felt fully, unshakably empowered.